Flow control on a under $2,000 espresso machine? It is possible, it is reversible, and I am of course talking about the Breville Dual Boiler Slayer mod. Boom! There's my Breville Dual Boiler. And it tastes amazing for light roast. This video assumes that you have done the actual Slayer mod. If you haven't seen that video, there is a tutorial which you can watch right here, and I will link it in the description down below as well. On this video, we're gonna cover how to set up your Breville Dual Boiler for the Slayer shots, some observations, some dialing in, some tweaking, so that you have a good starting point on how to explore and play around with your new flow profiling abilities on the Breville Dual Boiler. This Slayer mod is based on a machine that's actually called a Slayer that has a 3-group stage brewing process. The lever has an off, then it has a pre-brew, which is your pre-infusion, and then full brew, and it slowly ramps up to that, and you can set everything. Now it works differently on the Breville Dual Boiler, of course, because this is not an actual Slayer machine, but it uses the same idea as in both our flow profiling. We do have the now rerouted tubing and the knob, which is what we will use to control the water debit coming out, the flow of water. The stock Breville Dual Boiler pre-infusion, which works off of pressure, a set pressure for a set time, let's say 7 seconds, like 60% of the pressure at pre-infusion. And now this works completely different because flow profiling means that the pressure is at 100%, but the amount of water you're letting out is being restricted and is now being adjusted via flow. So even though your pressure gauge will change based on the amount of flow and water you're putting out, you're not actually profiling with the pressure, you're profiling with the water flow. Does this matter? Do you need to fully understand this in order to dial everything in and follow this video and make amazing coffee? No. So this was just for your information. If you don't care, you don't care. Great. Let's move on. Generally, with a light roast, you want to grind as fine as possible while also not introducing any channeling. Lighter roasts are generally more difficult and more nuanced to extract. And in order to get more of the yummy flavors and solubles out of the coffee, one way to do that is to grind finer and increase the surface area so water can pass through and more easily extracted as you've now increased your surface area. You don't have to do that really with dark roasts because dark roasts are much more porous and less dense, and they just want to give up their solubles a lot more when water comes into contact with it. Slayer mod is generally going to be for light roasts. You can grind finer because this gentle long pre-infusion with the lower flow of water will gently saturate the puck, making it a lot easier for water to go through and evenly extract all of your finely ground coffee, assuming that your coffee puck is well saturated and pretty evenly saturated. When you go into full brew, the water will less likely channel as it will go through the entire puck more evenly because it's already been fully saturated, instead of finding a weak point and just going right through there and over extracting that and under extracting in other areas, creating a very not yummy tasting cup of coffee. With the Slayer mod, you'll have infinite adjustments in terms of the quantity of water coming out, the amount of time that you're letting that water come out in the pre-infusion stage, in the full brew, in the total water contact time. Or you can even shut the water off after pre-infusion, let it bloom, and then reintroduce the water back slowly. All of this is going to be very manually controlled on the Breville Dual Boiler Slayer mod. Infinite possibility, infinite ways of doing this recipe. I've seen a few people now play with the Slayer mod on forums and videos, and everyone has a little bit of a different way of doing it. In order to set up your Breville Dual Boiler for the Slayer mod, press the up and down arrow to access the pre-infusion menu. Put that pre-infusion time to 0. Because you are now going to be the one controlling the pre-infusion with the knob and checking the time. The machine is no longer doing that. You are now the machine. And if you want to use the Breville Dual Boiler in the stock way, you actually can easily change this back by pressing the up and down button, accessing the pre-infusion menu, increasing your pre-infusion time to whatever you decide. I'm gonna put it to 7, and change the pre-infusion pressure to 60%, let's say, of the full brew, full pressure. To brew, you would just open the knob valve completely. Brew as you normally do with manual or 1 or 2 cups if you've programmed anything in there. It's as easy as that. And lastly, when you do a chemical backflushing with the Kefisa powder, for example, you will open the valve completely in order for all the water to flow out, and then you just do the clean me process as you normally would. And if you want more information on cleaning schedules, go watch this video right here. Let's talk about brewing with the Breville Dual Boiler and dialing in a starter recipe. I use the Slayer Mod tutorials to help me with this. And you can find all those references in the description down below. There are videos and there are articles, and I suggest watching both of them and all of them in addition to this video tutorial to give you a better depth of understanding and be able to adjust even further from what I'm going to discuss in this video. This is just to help you start up. One thing that they do mention in the video is adjusting the bar pressure on their machine. They're different machines and I don't think they work the same way when it comes to that. I didn't adjust the OPV, the overpressure valve. My machine with a fully open valve, fully open water flow in full pressure with a blind basket comes to about 10.5 bars. So that's where I'm starting. You don't have to set your machine exactly like this because every machine is going to be a little bit different. And once you understand what you need to do for your machine, you're golden. So don't even worry about that. The first thing that we're gonna do is figure out the flow rate coming out of your machine so that you can now document that and figure out what those settings are in your particular machine. In order to do that, you're going to need some sort of visual cue or reference. And so what I have is a sticky measuring tape in millimeters. Sorry, my American friends, if you use imperial, metric is gonna be kind of the winner in this one. And then I stuck another piece of tape so I had a reference of my point on the knob. You could also use an IKEA measuring tape if you have a double-sided tape. You could even take painter's tape and take a ruler and just mark a bunch of lines as long as they're equal and as long as it's repeatable. And I did that as well at the beginning. It wasn't very cute, but it worked. The reason for this is because now we have to measure out the amount of water coming out and what settings that is. And so Slayer recommends for a light roast that we're going to want about 40 to 45 grams of water out in 30 seconds. For a medium roast, they suggest 45 to 55 grams of water in 30 seconds. And for a dark roast, 55 to 60 grams in 30 seconds. So do you see from light to dark, we have less water coming out, so a more gentle flow. And once you go darker, you'll have more water coming out in 30 seconds. The water flow is coming out a little bit quicker. And these numbers are what we're going to be using on your machine and a scale to measure and weigh out the amount of water coming out in that time frame. And you want to play with your knob, set it to one setting, play with it, time it at 30 seconds, see how much water is coming out, and then adjust less or more until you get the amount that you need. The knob is very delicate, very delicate. I'm gonna go at about 1.5-ish, as precise as I can. Have your scale tare to 0, and then start and wait till you hit 30 seconds. See how much water is out in grams. So you can recall the time by clicking up 30 seconds. And we are at 38.6 grams, 38.7 grams of water. It's very, very sensitive, so I wouldn't go much higher than that. I might just go, turn it up, smidge, you see it barely shows, a smidge under 2 millimeters. And we try again. This second trial at 30 seconds, we now have a yield of water of 57.9 grams. Let's say you have light roast and that's all you drink, and you want to mark the water flow that comes out at the 40 to 45 grams in 30 seconds, that flow. You can just mark the right spot and have a pre-brew line and then have a full open water valve line, which you can just turn the knob completely, but you don't have to. It's maybe just a 1 or 2 centimeters to fully open it. But even then, the precision is gonna be quite difficult as it's a very minute turn. Now the second step is to select your dose and yield. Now the dose will be determined by your basket size using the double single-walled basket. They say on the website that you can go up to 22 grams, which I have never done, but with the light roast, I'm gonna generally be going between a 19 to 20 grams. Because you're also grinding very finely as well, the volume on the basket, something that people don't really talk about as much, is also to be considered, because If you overdose or you underdose, you'll have too much or not enough headroom underneath the shower screen for the water to go, and that's just gonna mess up your whole flow. If you want more information on that, there is another YouTuber that I found that does talk about this. So I found this video after I was doing everything. I just started doing that. So you wanna dose by basket capacity, but also factoring the volume, which is also dependent on your grind size, which is dependent on your brew method and dependent on your coffee beans. And I'll link that in the description down below for you. Now the Slayer Mod recipe is a good starting point for you if you have no idea where to start, and as you get familiar with the brew. And their recipe, the brew temperature at 93 Celsius, 199 Fahrenheit, to set your needle valve output, which in our case is the amount of water you're gonna be adjusting in the knob. They're saying 50 grams for 30 seconds, and that's generally what you're gonna start with. They don't specify the roast level, so this is just your starter recipe regarding what roast you have and bean. And then they're going with a 19 to 38 grams in and out, so a classic 1-to-2 brew ratio. And 50 seconds time. You want your total contact time, which includes the pre-infusion, and it includes the brew full pressure time, the entire time. From the moment you start your brew and the timer on the Breville Dual Boiler, essentially, you want that to be between 45 to 55 seconds. As a general rule, if you are longer than that, it's because the water's not flowing enough. You want to grind a little bit coarser so that water can flow through a little bit easier. If your shot is running too fast and it's below 45 seconds, that likely means that it's too loosey-goosey in your coffee puck and you're going to have to grind a little bit finer. All of this is also assuming that your puck prep is also good, even, you're putting enough pressure on the tamp, all of that. So I have a new bag of coffee that I haven't actually dialed in, so I'm gonna go through this process with all of you. I made a cup this morning and it was not very good. I have to adjust the grind setting, but I don't have it dialed in yet, so this is gonna be a learning process for the both of us. We're gonna go through this together. This is a Ethiopian single origin Gadeb Yirgachef. I should really learn how to pronounce that. Ethiopian with a peach pie, blackberry, white flower flavor, a high altitude, very high altitude of 1900 to 2200 meters, and a natural processed. My flow was very restricted and the brew time was way too long this morning, and the cup was so, it was drinkable because I also have sugar and milk in there, but it was very boring. I was gonna say bland, boring works as well. It was just missing anything amazing, because once you get this light roast, it's delicious. So I have now adjusted my grind setting to a little bit coarser so that it can go a bit faster, and we're going to try this again. I'm not gonna use the Slayer Mod recipe. I'm gonna just go with a 19.5, perfect. So I'm gonna wait till first drops, and now I'm gonna open up the valve. We're actually hitting 9 bar pressure, so that might be an indication that we're on the right mark here. So I am doing a ristretto. I'm at 32 grams out in 33 seconds. Because I'm doing ristretto, my recipe is going to be a little bit different. All right, let's try the latte art. Oh, cute. Let's taste it. I think it might have ran a little bit too fast, but keep in mind I am doing a ristretto. The 45 to 55 total water contact time is not what I'm gonna be aiming for. I was at 33 seconds with a ristretto, and also I was hitting 9 bars perfectly. I think if anything, I could grind a tad finer to slow it down a little bit, or to play with the water flow. Ooh, It is really good. Oh my God, so much better than the one I did this morning. Oh my God, so much better. And it tastes, there's a lot of complexity, but I feel like there can be a little bit more brightness that can come out of this that I'm not really achieving, but it's I'm happy. I would proudly serve this to guests because my guests would just be blown away either way by whatever I make. I feel like I could push it a little bit more, some of the fruitier notes, some of that acidity, some of that brightness. So these are some of the recommendations that Slayer would have to adjust by taste. If the body is too light, you can decrease the yield because a shorter shot is going to be less diluted. Opposite to that, if the body is too heavy, you can extend the yield because as your extraction keeps going, at the end, it just becomes a lot more water compared to water with solubles and all that coffee that you're getting. Now, in terms of fine tuning based on taste, because we want a good balance of acidity, bitterness, sweetness, and I'm getting it's so good though. I'm so happy right now. Okay, so in order to adjust for all of that, if it is too bright, too acidic, you want to grind finer. That will increase the total brew time. If there is some bitterness, however, you want to grind coarser, which will decrease the total brew time. There's a wonderful graph on the Slayer website for dialing in. It's basically a chart and it helps you go through everything. So once you've created a cup that's pretty decent, but you know that there's some fine tweaking you can do. You just kind of go down your flow chart. It's too much of this, it's too little of this. And then they give you some suggestions on modifications on what you could do to everything. They even have this thing called bump, where if you want it to have more vibrancy, that might be what I will need to do for this cup. So some of my personal observation and notes, I find it much harder to have a really bad tasting cup just because of the very low flow, slow pre-infusion, especially with the light roast. It's so much harder to extract the light roast. And so I find with the light roast, grinding finer and having that low flow and really nicely saturating the puck and preventing channeling, it makes it much harder to have a bad cup. But having that amazing cup is also very difficult and difficult to be repeatable because the knob is very sensitive. So having the exact same water flow each time is not going to be that easy. The Slayer machine, you preset all of those things in the 2 lever positions. It's a very different machine. This is the Slayer mod on the Breville Dual Boiler with a knob. So unless you have some sort of machinery or setup turns it at the exact right spot, if you are in robotics or engineering and you're able to make that, please, oh my God, please do and share it with all of us. You could always get a longer lever in order to make it a little bit easier to make those micro adjustments. Even if you have 2 lines that are touching, this is your pre-brew at the light roast. For the right amount of flow at pre-infusion, it's going to be hard to get those 2 lines to line up exactly perfectly each and every single time if you are manually controlling that knob. But I still find that the cups that I get overall are very good, very complex, bright, fruity, full of personality, delicious. So that is my how-to Slayer mod, a long overdue video. I really hope that this did help you. Like, subscribe, do all those fun things. If you want to check out the Slayer mod tutorial, you can check that out right here. If you want to brew with your Breville Dual Boiler light roast and you're not ready quite yet to do the Slayer mod, but you like a light roast, this is how you can use everything stock and extract better light roasts in this video right here. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.